And my love for you.
Last month I had one pixel juice too many and went crazy on a well-known global auction site. I bought an original Commodore 64 and a few other bits to play with. If you've seen my Retro Games of the C64 video, you'll know that I never had a Commodore 64 back in the day and that I was enormously excited to get my hands on a modern fake C64, and very good it is too. But now I have the real thing and that makes me feel all extra fizzy in my tum-tum. The man on the internet says it's been refurbished and recapped, and on the outside it certainly looks good, but I'm not going to go fiddling on the inside unless there's a problem. One thing I haven't got is a tape deck. Commodore used their own custom tape deck and I can't be bothered with the hassle of that right now. Also, I love cartridges, and so I've got some original, some modern compilations of old games. I've also got a little cartridge port extender which I hope will reduce the strain on the C64's old joints and give me slightly easier access from the front. The Commodore 64 is a real home computer legend. Recorded as the highest selling single computer model of all time, it's an 8-bit machine first shown in 1982 at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. In the UK it was outsold by the cheap and cheerful ZX Spectrum, and it also didn't do quite so well in Japan against domestic products, but overall it sold around 15 million units. In 1980, the C64's predecessor, the VIC-20, introduced the iconic bread bin design and moved Commodore from making all-in-one personal business machines like the PET to making home computers. The VIC-20 was a well-built unit with a proper keyboard, colour and sound, but was compromised by only having 5K of RAM. Some of that was used by the screen, leaving just 3.5K for programs. It had a claustrophobic 22-character display and no native graphics modes or sprites. The Commodore 64 fixed all of these bad issues while keeping the good stuff too. If anything, the VIC-20 whetted the public appetite for more. The C64's case is a darker shade than the VIC-20. I'm not sure why they chose this brown colour, but it didn't seem to hit sales too much. Just like the VIC-20, it has a real keyboard but isn't so bulky that you can't put it away in a cupboard when your dinner is ready. It keeps the function key design and the funky graphics characters on the keyboard too. It also has a good selection of ports neatly integrated into the case, including a joystick port, cartridge port, printer, serial, tape deck and RGB monitor output, which is useful for me now because there's no way I'm going to try tuning it into a modern TV via UHF. RAM was a significant problem for all the early home computer manufacturers. Users wanted more memory but didn't want to pay for it. You tended to buy a base unit and add memory when you needed to, but that led to a user base with all sorts of memory configurations, giving software developers a bit of a headache. 8-bit processors usually had 16-bit address buses and could access up to 64K. It sounds pathetic by today's standards, but those RAM chips were expensive in the early 80s. Commodore anticipated that the price would start to drop and designed the C64 before it would be able to manufacture it at a reasonable cost. That was a good decision, and the C64 was released in the US at under $600. It came with the full 64K as standard, hence the name. That left nearly 40K for basic programs, which wasn't too bad back then. It also has custom hardware known as VIC and SID that supports 16-colour 320x200 pixel graphics with sprites and multi-channel waveform sound. That was all very attractive to the game developers of the day, and Commodore knew that games were good for sales. If you like what I'm doing in this video, then if you haven't already, please do subscribe to my channel so I can do more. So what about the other stuff I bought? Well, this is part 1 of a C64 Top 50 compilation in all its naked glory. It comes with a little brochure summarising all the games and their controls, which is actually really useful. There are 12 games presented in this menu, and I'm going to quickly look at the ones I found most interesting. First up is Rick Dangerous. It's a late 80s game and demonstrates the sound and graphics chip's capabilities so well. It looks and plays like a next generation game. In contrast, Thrust is a classic old school vector arcade game, and bloody tricky it is too. I do love a good old vector graphics game, but I'm mostly shooting when I should be picking up that pod with my tractor beam. So what do you think of my game playing skills?
It's just rubbish.
Fair enough. Wizball is a surreal world where you play a wizard who appears as a ball. You bounce around shooting enemies in an attempt to restore colour to the world. Even with the instructions I'm not really sure what's going on, but I still like it. The same goes for Thing on a Spring. You bounce around from room to room, navigating various strange objects that make boing noises and throw you around. The graphics remind me a little of a more modern Jet Set Willy, which is also on this compilation. Paradroid is a top-down game with very smooth scrolling. You play a droid sent to liberate a galactic space freighter from its mutinous robot crew. Of course, I read the instructions after playing it, so I now know there's a bit more to this game, but I won't spoil it for you. International Karate Plus is a game about kicking and punching people. Fun fact from the internet, in the US the C64 version was known as Chop and Drop. Nice! Boulder Dash is a classic 2D puzzle game where the player moves around a series of caves, collecting all the diamonds in a limited time. Moving a boulder can make it drop, and if you happen to be under it at the time, you get squashed. Told you, idiot. Ballblazer is interesting because it's a split-screen two-player game using 3D polygon graphics. In 1985, that's a lot of new technology. As you can see, I played alone as all my friends were busy that day. The game is effectively a two-person football type affair with moving goals. The next cartridge I'm looking at is Dizzy themed. There are about a dozen Dizzy games made for the C64 by the Oliver twins between 1987 and 1992. They were all side-scrolling arcade puzzle adventure games featuring a cute egg character. The progression is amazing. The early games look good, but the later ones look like early console or 16-bit games and are really playable even 30 plus years later. The second theme cartridge I have is for Ultimate Play the Game. I'm a bit of a fan of early Ultimate games like Jetpack and Attic Attack, but some of these titles I'm not so familiar with. I do know Sabre Wulf though, and I'm a bit of an expert as demonstrated here by the beating I'm taking in the very first room. I once got 99% in this game, I'll have you know. Imhotep is a new one on me. It seems to be a side-scrolling shooter with some nice parallax effects in the background and an Egyptian theme. Outlaw is in a similar vein in that it's a side-scrolling shooter, but this time on horseback in the Wild West. I think the music sums it up. The Staff of Karnath was the first of a series of action-adventure games using Ultimate's oblique isometric style. It looks pretty good, but I think I'll need to invest a lot of time to fully appreciate it. Nightshade uses Ultimate's 3D isometric visuals, similar to Alien 8 but scrolling and with transparent near walls. It has some really atmospheric sound effects too. With my developer hat on, I find it really interesting to watch. If only it ran just a little bit faster and smoother, it'd be damn near perfect. Now it's time to go back to the old school. First up is an original Commodore Amiga race cartridge. This was also available for the VIC-20 and based on a Bally Midway vector graphics arcade game. Visually it's pretty similar to the VIC-20 version. The graphics are a bit better, but it's fundamentally the same. Still, I like Amiga Race, and can play it for hours without looking up. Second on my old school list is Robotron 2084. I'm told, by the person who sold it, that this is quite rare. It's based on the classic Williams arcade game. You kill the nasty robots and rescue various innocent humans. Each level gets progressively more manic. If I'm honest, I found the controls to be less responsive than I'd like, but otherwise I really like the game. The third and final game on my old school list is off the compilation cartridge, and it's a classic home computer port, Chuckie Egg! An old school platformer where you collect the eggs while avoiding giant chickens. The C64 port is more colourful than other versions and plays well. I'm not sure about the proportions of the farmer, but I shouldn't judge because that's mean. You need a certain degree of patience to get all the eggs, but there is a timer and time bonuses to be had. Each level presents new challenges and the game is just so addictive. In my humble opinion, the Commodore 64 hit just the right spot at the right time. Commodore already had a reputation as a quality manufacturer with the PET and had a home user base from the VIC-20. The C64 wasn't a cheap toy, but it was compact enough to live discreetly in 1980s homes, and it was designed to be attractive to games developers in a time when games were pushing the market. All this at a reasonable price meant it had to be a success. Next on my shopping list is a Kung Fu Flash for instant access to more software, and a tape deck if I feel brave and I can find one that looks okay. But remember, please drink and bid responsibly. I'm a skilled and knowledgeable human man. You might not be so lucky. Thanks for watching. I'm off to the pub. Cheers.